car market isn't just broken, it's bleeding you dry. And while you're focused on gas prices and flashy EVs, a much bigger disaster has been building in silence: auto debt. Quiet, massive, and spiraling out of control. We're talking about $1.7 trillion in auto loans. Dealers flooded the market with overhyped markups. Banks approved reckless financing, and now the whole system is cracking. People are underwater, inventories are overflowing, and the collapse is already in motion. How did a $35,000 car turn into a $50,000 mistake? Why are automakers slashing jobs while prices stay sky high? And is this the end of car ownership as we know it? What's happening? When inventory started returning in 2022, consumers were hopeful. They believed prices would fall, that the era of overpaying was finally coming to an end. But dealerships had tasted blood, and they weren't about to go back to the old normal. Instead of dropping prices, they invented a new system: aggressive dealer markups. Additional dealer markup stickers, often abbreviated as ADM, began appearing everywhere. That Bronco you wanted for $40,000? Now it was $83,000. The Chevy Silverado that once sold for $45,000. Dealers were pushing it for over $65,000. Even the humble Honda Civic Type R was being marked up by $10,000 to $15,000 on average. But it didn't stop at stickers. Dealers bundled mandatory accessories, window tint, nitrogen-filled tires, VIN etching, ceramic coatings into value packages that could add thousands of dollars to the total price. Financing was another trap. Customers who secured outside loans were often told those deals weren't accepted, forcing them into dealer-arranged financing with inflated interest rate and add-ons they didn't need. This wasn't salesmanship, it was manipulation. Dealers preyed on fear of missing out. Buyers were told there was a waiting list, that someone else was ready to sign, that prices would only go up, and the numbers showed just how effective this manipulation was. In January of 2022, 82% of American car buyers paid over MSRP for new vehicles. That wasn't the exception, it became the rule. But when new cars became unobtainable, something even stranger happened. People turned to the used market, and that's when the real insanity began: the death of depreciation. Used cars used to mean savings. That was the basic equation. Buy something a couple of years old, let someone else eat the depreciation, and enjoy a reliable ride for less money. It was the fallback strategy for anyone priced out of the new market. But between 2021 and 2023, that formula collapsed. The resale market flipped. Vehicles that had already clocked 50,000 miles were selling for more than their original sticker price. A used Toyota Tacoma cost more than a new one, if you could even find a new one. Honda Civics with 3 years of wear were being listed at dealer lots for more than brand new models. A 5-year-old RAV4? You'd pay over $35,000 and still lose in a bidding war. Depreciation didn't just stop, it reversed. And this shift didn't just affect buyers, it broke the entire logic of vehicle ownership. Suddenly, owning a car was like holding a speculative asset. People flipped leases for profit. Rental car companies sold used inventory at auction for a premium. Consumers treated trade-ins like stock trades. This was not sustainable. The idea that a 5-year-old car could gain value was a cultural distortion fueled by panic and scarcity. And as prices rose, so did expectations. Buyers now assumed cars would retain more value than they actually could. That illusion shattered as supply chains normalized and vehicle production caught up. And when the bottom finally fell out of the used car bubble, thousands of buyers were left clutching loan agreements they barely understood. Contracts that looked manageable at first, but turned into financial traps disguised as monthly payments. We sifted through hundreds of pages of loan data and industry leaks to bring you this. So if this helped you see the truth, hit like and subscribe. It keeps us digging. From freedom to servitude, how cheap credit backfired. It started with good intentions, or at least that is how it looked. Before the pandemic, car buyers across the United States enjoyed what appeared to be a golden age of affordable financing. Interest rates were low, often hovering between 2 and 3%. Loan terms had stretched from the standard 60 months to 72, and in some cases, all the way to 84 months. It felt like freedom. Buyers could walk into a dealership, secure a manageable monthly payment, and drive away with a new vehicle, even if they technically could not afford the full price. But beneath that smooth-talking monthly payment lurked something sinister: debt stacking. Consumers began signing longer-term loans, not because they wanted to, but because it was the only way to afford an increasingly overpriced vehicle. What started as a solution became a trap, with loan terms growing longer as car prices rose higher. And then came the pandemic. In the aftermath of factory shutdowns and semiconductor shortages, dealerships faced record low inventory. Yet at the exact same time, consumer demand spiked, fueled by stimulus checks, deferred expenses, and a cultural yearning for mobility during lockdowns. The result? Car prices exploded. But instead of pulling back, the lending industry doubled down. Banks loosened their credit standards even further, approving subprime borrowers at rates not seen since the mid-2000s. It was sold as a recovery strategy, but it functioned more like bait. These weren't loans designed to empower. They were loans engineered to keep buyers hooked and inventory moving. The industry had shifted from financing a car to financing a dependency. And once you're in, getting out becomes nearly impossible. Then interest rates rose, and the monthly payments exploded. The $742 car payment that's bleeding you dry. What does it really mean to buy the same car, just a few years apart, but end up paying thousands more? The answer lies not in the vehicle itself, but in the invisible forces wrapped around it: interest rates, insurance premiums, and a broken economic environment. Let's break it down using one of the most sensible and popular vehicles in America, the Honda Accord. In 2021, a buyer could walk into a dealership and purchase a brand new Accord for $31,000. With a down payment of $5,000 and an interest rate of 2.5%, that buyer would be looking at a monthly payment of around $461. Add in car insurance, which averaged $150 per month at the time, and the total monthly cost was roughly $611. Fast forward to 2025. The same car, the same sticker price, the same $5,000 down payment, but this time the interest rate is 6.3%. That jumps the monthly payment to $506. Insurance, now up by 50% across most of the country, brings the monthly total to $731. The difference? Over a 5-year period, that buyer now pays a staggering $43,860, an increase of more than $7,000 compared to someone who bought the same car in 2021. And remember, this is assuming the manufacturer's suggested retail price stayed flat, which it rarely does. This isn't just bad luck. It's the compounded effect of a market built to offload risk onto the buyer. Interest rates rise, and your loan terms balloon. Insurance premiums climb, and your monthly budget starts to suffocate. The hidden cost of ownership now rivals the cost of the car itself. It gets worse. 1 in 6 Americans currently pays more than $1,000 per month for their car loan. That doesn't include gas, maintenance, registration, or surprise repairs. It also does not include rising insurance premiums, which have become a runaway burden in major states like California, Texas, and Florida. While buyers bled from every monthly payment, automakers were bleeding inventory, because behind every overpriced loan was a vehicle the market could no longer absorb, and the lots were starting to overflow. The flooded lot crisis. It is no longer a secret whispered among insiders. Drive past almost any dealership in the United States, and you will see it with your own eyes, row after row of brand new vehicles, spotless and unsold. These lots, once bustling with buyers and buzzing with foot traffic, now feel eerily like open-air warehouses. What was once a symbol of prosperity has become a warning sign. The auto industry is drowning in its own inventory. As of late 2024, the number of unsold vehicles sitting on dealership lots has crossed 3 million. That is not a rounding error. That is a historic oversupply, up over 120% compared to the previous year. Cars are not just sitting idle for a few weeks. They are collecting dust for months. The average supply window has now stretched beyond 90 days, with some brands carrying inventory for up to 120 days or more. For an industry built around constant turnover, this is the equivalent of an artery being blocked. Manufacturers are panicking, but instead of adjusting production quickly, they are doing what they know best: throwing money at the problem. Automakers have begun offering incentives averaging 7.7% of the vehicle's transaction price just to get cars moving off the lot. That is thousands of dollars in discounts per unit, and still the vehicles are not selling. The strategy may have worked 10 years ago, but in 2025, buyers are different. Consumers are burdened with higher interest rates, skyrocketing insurance premiums, and job insecurity. A 7% rebate does not cut through the fear. It only raises one question. If this car needs that much incentive, is it even worth buying? For automakers, the visual of overflowing lots is more than a PR problem. It is a signal to investors that something is fundamentally broken. And when automakers see the warning signs pile up, history shows us exactly what they do next. But the automakers weren't just looking at the lots, they were staring down the payrolls. And that's when the cuts began. Layoffs, shutdowns, and the collapse of Nissan. When the numbers stop adding up, automakers respond the same way every time. They start firing people. First, it is contractors. Then, shifts get cut. Eventually, entire plants go dark. What we are seeing now is not just a blip. It is a tidal wave of layoffs sweeping through the industry. Nissan, once Japan's proud second-largest automaker behind Toyota, has become the most alarming case study in collapse. In 2024, Nissan's profits plunged by an astonishing 90% compared to the previous year. It was not a minor dip, it was an implosion. The company responded by announcing the elimination of 9,000 jobs globally and slashing production capacity by 20%. But even that was not enough. Desperate for a lifeline, Nissan entered merger talks with Honda, hoping to form a Japanese mega group with a market value north of $60 billion. Those talks failed, and so did Nissan's last hope of survival as a standalone powerhouse. But Nissan is not alone. Ford has begun pulling back production at key facilities in Michigan and Kentucky. Stellantis has issued waves of voluntary buyouts and early retirement packages across its Jeep and Chrysler divisions. Volkswagen has trimmed its electric vehicle output and begun closing night shifts in multiple European and North American plants. Across the board, thousands of workers are being asked to pack up and go home, with no timeline for return. This is not just an industry crisis, it is a middle-class crisis. These are high-paying, benefit-backed jobs in towns that depend on them. When a plant closes in places like Canton, Illinois, or Smyrna, Tennessee, the pain does not stop at the factory gate. It ripples into diners, hardware stores, daycare centers, and entire school districts. The very foundation of the American manufacturing dream is cracking, and while corporate leaders shuffle press releases and performance reports, the people building these cars are getting pink slips. And just when things could not get worse for them, politics stepped in to pour gasoline on the fire. Because Washington wasn't about to stay quiet, and Trump's latest move made sure of that. The tariff time bomb that just went off. It started with a podium, a flag, and a promise to put American cars first. But what came next was something far more dramatic. In early 2025, President Donald Trump returned to the spotlight with a sweeping economic weapon, a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and auto parts. On paper, the move was framed as patriotic, meant to protect domestic jobs and manufacturing. In practice, it was a loaded cannon aimed straight at an already fragile auto industry. Nearly half of all vehicles sold in the United States are either built abroad or rely on imported parts. This includes some of America's most iconic models like the Chevy Silverado, Ram 1500, and Ford Mach-E, all of which are manufactured in Canada or Mexico. According to a study by the U.S. International Trade Commission, a tariff of this scale could reduce vehicle imports by 74% and increase average car prices by at least 5%. That is the official estimate. But the real effect is even worse. Consumers assume the tariff means prices will skyrocket, so automakers price accordingly. Ferrari has already announced price hikes of up to 10% for US-bound vehicles, and they will not be the last. This creates a trap for every dealership holding foreign inventory. Do they eat the tariff and destroy their profit margins, or do they pass the cost to customers who are already hesitant to buy? Either way, the result is the same: fewer sales, higher prices, and greater consumer frustration. Just as the industry was trying to offload excess vehicles, Trump's tariff flooded the market with even more uncertainty. It was like throwing a match into a gasoline-soaked garage. And that match, it did not just light a fire, it triggered a chain reaction the entire economy is now caught in. This isn't a correction, it's a chain reaction. Some still think this is just a cycle, a normal correction, a moment of economic indigestion before the car market regains balance. But they are wrong. This is not a correction. This is a chain reaction, one that is reshaping the entire automotive landscape from top to bottom. Here is how it plays out. Layoffs reduce worker income. Less income means fewer car buyers. Fewer buyers lead to growing inventory. More inventory forces production cuts. Production cuts create more layoffs. It is a feedback loop, and it is vicious. And just as the labor market collapses, banks start tightening loan standards, cutting off financing to all but the most qualified buyers. That leads to even fewer car sales, triggering more dealership closures and manufacturer panic. It is not linear, it is circular. The flywheel of collapse is spinning now, and every corner of the market is being pulled into it. This is exactly how an industry crashes, not with a single spectacular moment, but through the slow, grinding failure of systems that used to work. Dealers can no longer rely on sales targets. Buyers can no longer depend on trade-ins. Automakers can no longer mask declining demand with marketing. The old tools do not work anymore. It is like a row of dominoes that stretches from Wall Street to your driveway. One falls, then the next, and the next, until there is nothing left standing but the silence of unsold cars and unpaid loans. And when the dominoes fall, the pain does not stop at the factories or the finance firms. It lands in your town, your garage, your monthly bills, and it is only just getting started. Your town will feel it first. You don't need to be a Wall Street analyst to see what's happening. Just drive through your neighborhood. Look at the dealership on the corner that used to have balloons, banners, and packed parking lots. Now, the lights are dim. The lot is full, not because of success, but because nobody is buying. This isn't just a national economic trend. This is the slow-motion collapse of local economies, one zip code at a time. When dealerships go under, the pain doesn't end at the showroom doors. Every closure means lost jobs. Salespeople, mechanics, finance managers, receptionists, entire teams vanish overnight. These are not abstract numbers. These are neighbors, parents, breadwinners. And for smaller towns where a dealership might be one of the few sizable employers, that loss cuts deep. One shutdown store can mean dozens of people out of work and dozens of families suddenly struggling to pay their bills. Dealerships are one of the largest contributors to local sales tax bases. In many counties across the United States, the bulk of retail sales tax revenue comes from auto sales, especially on new vehicles. When those sales vanish, so does the revenue that funds road maintenance, public schools, and local law enforcement. Cities and towns already operating on tight budgets are forced to make impossible decisions, cut staff, cancel programs, or raise taxes on residents who are already overburdened. This collapse in tax revenue sets off a chain reaction. Libraries close early, trash collection slows down, potholes go unfilled, public parks deteriorate, and worst of all, people start moving out. Not because they want to, but because their community no longer supports their lives. As middle-class flight increases, the burden shifts even more heavily onto those who remain. And who are those people left behind? Often they are the ones with the fewest options. Lower-income families and working-class individuals who rely on public transit or older vehicles are hit hardest. Without new inventory, trade-in options, or affordable financing, they simply cannot afford to replace aging vehicles. And when the local dealership vanishes, so does the closest reliable service center. Now even basic maintenance becomes a logistical and financial nightmare. This isn't just about economics. It's about the slow erosion of independence. In small-town America, losing your car is like losing your legs. You can't get to work, can't pick up your kids, can't make it to medical appointments. You're stuck, isolated by an invisible barrier called affordability. And when that barrier stretches across an entire town, what's left is a ghost shell of a community that once moved freely. It's not just an economic loss, it's a way of life, vanishing. And the next generation, they're already opting out altogether. The rise of the undrivable class. For decades, car ownership was a rite of passage, a symbol of adulthood, a badge of freedom. But that tradition is breaking, fast. Among Gen Z and younger millennials, a seismic shift is underway. Not because they don't want cars, but because the world they've inherited makes car ownership feel more like a punishment than a privilege. Take a look at the data. In the past 10 years, there has been a steady decline in driver's license applications among Americans under the age of 25. Not because they're lazy or uninterested, but because they can't afford the entire package that comes with owning a vehicle. The loan, the insurance, the maintenance, the fuel. For many young adults, the math just doesn't work out. Add to that the new reality of work. Remote jobs, gig economy gigs, and hybrid workplaces have fundamentally changed the need to commute daily. When you no longer need to drive to an office 5 days a week, the urgency to own a car fades. Add in the explosion of rideshare apps, electric bikes, and scooter services, and you get a generation that's rethinking what transportation even means. And here's where it turns dark. This is not a shift made out of preference. It's one made out of necessity. Young people aren't choosing to be carless for fun. Many are being priced out of the market entirely. For the first time in modern American history, a growing class of citizens is becoming undrivable, not because of license restrictions, but because of financial ones. The term undrivable class isn't hyperbole. It's a reflection of a deepening social divide. Those with wealth enjoy upgraded Teslas, Range Rovers, and cutting-edge hybrids. Everyone else? They're on the bus, if there even is one. Or worse, they're stuck at home, isolated by infrastructure that never considered a world without cars. The result is clear. Fewer road trips, fewer DMV visits, fewer young people learning how to change a tire or jump a battery. The culture of driving is evaporating, and with it, an entire piece of American identity. What we lost wasn't just mobility, it was identity, because driving was never just about getting somewhere. It was about what it meant to move freely. Goodbye to the American driving dream. For much of the 20th century, the car was more than a machine. It was a symbol, the muscle car in the driveway, the family road trip across state lines, the first beat-up sedan you bought with your summer job money. It wasn't just transportation, it was independence, rebellion, romance, and pride rolled into one. But today, that dream is on life support. Instead of freedom, cars now represent shackles, $1,000 monthly payment, ballooning insurance rates, inescapable interest, surveillance tech tracking your every move, and vehicles designed not to be fixed by you, but to be leased, replaced, and monetized by someone else. The nostalgia is still there. We still see it in movies, in music, in classic car shows. But for most Americans, those golden years are now locked behind a wall of pricing, maintenance nightmares, and disappearing service infrastructure. The car has gone from something you cherished to something you endure. And this betrayal runs deep. Working-class Americans used to take pride in maintaining their own cars. Now, hood latches are electronic, engine bays are sealed, software updates lock out third-party mechanics. What used to be a source of empowerment is now a constant reminder of powerlessness. This is not just an economic betrayal, it's an emotional one, the death of a cultural icon. The realization that what once symbolized the open road now represents financial entrapment. And for those who grew up dreaming of their own ride, the message is clear. Unless you're rich, stay in your lane. So, is there any hope at all? Or are we already too far gone? Maybe there is still a path forward, but only if we act fast and act smart. The reckoning we can no longer avoid. There is no more denying it. The car market is in a crisis, and the signals are everywhere. Sky-high inventory levels, soaring auto loan debt, a collapse in dealership viability, generational shifts in transportation behavior, layoffs at legacy automakers, and now the looming pressure of new tariffs. This isn't just a bad year for cars. This is a reckoning, a systemic unraveling of the way we buy, finance, and depend on vehicles. And the longer we pretend it's temporary, the harder the landing will be. There are only three ways this ends. The first is a market reset. Prices crash, inventory clears, financing returns to sanity, and the industry slowly rebuilds trust with consumers. This is the most hopeful scenario, but also the least likely without significant intervention. The second option is recession. As consumers pull back, layoffs spread and defaults rise. Automakers and dealers could spiral further. Loan accessibility will continue to tighten. Only the wealthy will afford new vehicles, while everyone else scrambles to maintain what they already own. And the third path? Realignment. A full-scale transformation of how we move. More car sharing, modular electric vehicles, and public infrastructure built for access, not ownership. The ground under the auto industry is crumbling. This isn't just a correction, it's a reckoning. So if you want to stay ahead of the fallout, subscribe now. Because we're breaking stories the dealerships hope you never hear.